In light of our current fight against COVID-19, we ask that you all maintain some social distance and please be able to wear a mask if you're able to do so. In 2018, when I took over as mayor, I ended up conducting what we call a school safety roundtable. I was really heartbroken over a number of incidents that had occurred in our Riverton area, and just concerned for the safety generally of our residents and for our school-age population. And I know our city council felt the same way. So we conducted this roundtable. We invited all of the principals, our first responders here in the city to attend. And we asked the question, what is it that you are most concerned with? The city does not, of course, handle the curriculum of the school, nor are we responsible for its funding. But what can we do in our leadership positions to help? And he said, we are mostly, the two things that we're very concerned with is the physical safety of our students. And through that conversation, they brought out the fact that we cannot have full-time school resource officers at all junior high schools. And so our council appropriately made that change. And we now have that in place at the high school and also junior high schools. That acts as a very valuable resource. The other thing that came out of that meeting is that the school administrators and principals, teachers were very concerned about the mental health of their students. And the mental health, anxiety, depression, incidents of self-harm, all of these things on the rise, and we're really concerned with them. So what came from that is this event here called the Live in Real Life series. This is our 5th event. We have one in September and then typically in January. That kind of coincides with our Hope Week, where we work with the high school and Hope Squads to really raise awareness about suicide and do what we can to try to prevent such tragedies in our community. These events have been a partnership effort, and we've worked very closely with Jordan School District and with Riverton High School. Also, our Healthy Riverton Committee, which is fantastic, and other educational institutions. And so we create this Live in Real Life brand. And over the last 4 sessions, we've been able to hear from noted experts. And we're excited to hear from our speakers here this evening. Before we do that, however, I would like to give Leanne Powell, who is serves as the Utah Recreation and Parks Director, a moment to come up and say a few words. And I'd like to invite the members of the City Council that are here in the audience, if they would step forward too and help me accept this award that we're about to receive. Leanne.
Thank you very much for allowing me just to have a couple of moments to recognize this great program that's been established. As the mayor indicated, my name is Leanne Powell. I'm the executive director of the Utah Recreation and Parks Association. So this association represents about 1,400 parks and recreation professionals across the state of Utah who are doing these types of community programs all across the state. As part of our March conference every year, we get nominations for a number of different awards, and then our past presidents get together and choose the winners of those awards. So one of the awards we always give is for an outstanding program in the state. As you can imagine, Parks and Recreation, that's really kind of what we're about. We provide programs to bring the communities together, and so generally speaking, that outstanding program is kind of the important award that we give out, and there's lots of competition. And this Live in Real Life series last year was nominated for that outstanding program and received it at our annual conference. So one of the things I just kind of wanted to explain as far as is our past presidents, when they get together and look at these, they probably had 30 outstanding program nominations to go through and look at and try to determine which one's going to be the outstanding program. And I think the thing that stood out to those past presidents in this particular nomination was kind of like what Mayor Stagg was saying, that you get together a group of people and you address a problem. And then you take that problem or that issue and you take action. So lots of times you see these groups get together and say, okay, what are some issues and how can we address it? And the thing that so impressed the past presidents of this group was the action that was taken almost immediately from that program, and a very impactful program that brings together the community, lots of partners, to truly make a difference in the community. So with that said, to the council and your staffs, on behalf of the Utah Recreational Parks Association, our members and our board, we would like to award you with this 2020 Outstanding Program presented to Riverton City Live in Real Life Series in recognition for outstanding accomplishments in parks, recreation, and service to your community.
Thank you very much. It really is important to our community. It's been incredible, the participation that we've had at our previous events. And this one here, we're a little light, and I blame Coco on that one. I know our very first event, it was a packed house. We had some 1,500 people in attendance. And so it really is a community effort. At this time, it's my pleasure and honor to introduce our two devoted public servants and speakers, and also I consider my friends, State Senator Dan Thatcher and Utah Attorney General Sean Reyes. Tonight's topic is themed Protecting Our Children from Suicide, Addiction, Abuse, and Other Silent Threats. We'll first hear for a few minutes from Senator Thatcher, who has represented District 12 in the Utah State Senate since January of 2011, and has been a champion for addressing many of the issues that we'll discuss tonight. We'll then hear from Attorney General Reyes. Sean Reyes has served as Utah's 21st Attorney General and the state's top law enforcement officer since 2013. He graduated summa cum laude from Brigham Young University and earned his law degree with honors from UC Berkeley. Attorney General Reyes has led many significant achievements over the past 7 years, ensuring Utah and its citizens are safe from white-collar crime, violence, drug crimes, and criminal enterprises is a top priority for the Attorney General's office. As a global expert in combating human trafficking, Reyes has led the way in advocating for the most vulnerable, both domestically and abroad. Reyes has a passion for technology and has implemented cutting-edge tech advancements to improve law enforcement capabilities. One success story is the Safe UT app, which helps Utah kids in crisis. It is without doubt AG Reyes' implementation of cutting-edge technology will see Utah keep abreast of criminals in today's environment and ultimately provide a safer Utah for many years to come. So without further ado, our first speaker is Senator Thatcher.
So for me, this issue became front and center in the summer of 2013 when I received a phone call from a close friend and constituent who told me the story that happened to his 15-year-old son. Without knowing those details, it left me with this realization. I remember as a child being taught what a telephone was, and being taught what 911 was, and being taught how to get a police, fire, or ambulance instantly, immediately, no matter what was happening. As a grown adult, as a state senator, I had no idea where to get help for mental health or suicide ideation. As I started to research this issue and as I got deeper into it, I realized how common that problem was. In this room right now, is there anyone who can tell me off the top of their head what number to call for suicide prevention? There are experts in this room for suicide prevention. I do not see any. I see one hand. John, can you tell us what that number is out loud?
800-273-8255.
Say that again. 1-800-273-8255. 8255. Who can say that back to me? Having just heard it. The reality is, our 911 system is an absolute lifesaver. And I have never personally lived in a world that didn't have it. It was implemented in 1976. For just a minute, imagine what your world would be like without 911. And yet that is the very world that we find ourselves in when it comes to the leading cause of death for Utah kids. No one knows where to get help. And that started my crusade. In the 2014 legislative session, I brought forward a bill that would have designated the one and only 3-digit number not in statewide use that had an FCC allowable application. That bill was blocked. It was held up, it was stopped by the Salt Lake County mayor, who argued that instead we should use the one and only 3-digit number we had as a vanity phone number for the county so that citizens could more easily complain about potholes and pay their water bills. I'm sure you all think that's a much better use. Well, after that bill got held up, it was Attorney General Sean Reyes who stepped up and said, let me help you. Let me help you get this through. We can't let the issue die. So instead of designating a number, let's instead build a task force. Let's build a committee. Let's get together, mental health experts, crisis response experts, and let's find a solution. And it was that committee where we created SafeUT, which launched in January of 2016. We never stopped fighting for that 3-digit number, though. It just took going to Congress, where I was able to successfully recruit Senator Orrin Hatch and Congressman Chris Stewart to run legislation through the United States Congress that will lead to the designation of 988 as a nationwide hotline number for mental health and suicide crisis response. We're still about a year and a half away from its full implementation, and in the meantime, we are going to lose people. Just like we've lost them since that first bill was killed in 2014. So if you do not have SafeUT on your phone, I know it's super rude to have your phones out while people are talking, but I want you to do it, so I asked you to. If you do not have SafeUT on your phone, please take it out. Go to the App Store. Go to Google. What's that? What's the Google Play? Sorry, I'm using Apple. I know. Install the app on your phone. And I'm sure General Reyes will go into further detail, but the short version is this. With SafeUT, you push one button. You don't have to know the number. You don't have to search it on Google. You launch the app and push one button. And 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, you can get help from a licensed clinical social worker. It has saved countless lives in the state of Utah. It has been used tens of thousands of times. In addition to the suicide prevention and counseling services, there's also the ability to send communications directly to your school administrators, to your school resource officers, and to your school counselors to get help for issues like bullying, and in some cases, planned school attacks. We have had, last time I counted, it was 379 reports through the Safety app statewide of weapons, explosives, or planned school attacks. 354 were verified, meaning law enforcement took a student into custody along with weapons or explosives or a plan to do something like this. And in all of those cases, we were able to intervene, save lives, and give those kids resources instead of taking them to jail or more. So Safety has changed the state of Utah, but we can do so much more. 98 will do so much more. But more than that, the number one thing we can do as individuals is not be afraid to talk about mental health issues. I know that's easier said than done. But if you ask someone, how are you doing, as a question instead of reading, that's a step in the right direction. Checking in with your friends and family can save their lives. So with that, I'm going to invite General Reyes to come up, and he can go into much more detail about Safety and why it is epic, and 98 and why that's epic, and why caring about each other is the solution for all of our problems.
If by chance you don't recognize us, based on the program, that's Senator Thatcher Creebeard, and that's a photo of me from 2015. Did too many 90-hour weeks working, put on a couple of extra pounds. So sorry, next time we'll get you more accurate photos. It's truly an honor to be here. And before I get into my substantive remarks, I do want to acknowledge a few people and give you a few caveats. So I'm a lawyer. We have to have some of these claims. First and foremost, I want to thank Director Leanne Powell for creating the program. Her team, including Cheryl Barnes, were the ones who had to work with our schedules trying to coordinate this. So congratulations to Director Leanne Powell. Congratulations on your hit sitcom too, Parks and Recreation. I'm a big fan. Thank you. Mayor Trent Staggs, I can't tell you how fortunate you are here in Riverton to have a mayor this caliber, not only in his skills and his leadership, but in the integrity that he has as a person, character. He's been an incredible partner on a number of things, including working with us to better protect our families from mental and behavioral health challenges, addictions, and other threats to our community. So, Mayor, honored to be here. I was going to tell some stories from our previous lives, but given the time, I won't. You're running for something, and I'm probably looking for something too, so probably better. I want to thank the organizers, too, for working with our very difficult schedules. I actually had months ago planned in the far side of the state a campaign event and thought I wasn't going to be able to participate. They were so flexible, they were going to have me stream in and zoom in. But instead, I had my campaign team all go down there, and right before I was able to zoom that way so I could be here, because truly campaigns are essential, they're necessary, but saving the lives of children, for me, for Senator Thatcher, for Mayor Staggs, is the most important thing that we can do, and I'm glad that we're here. If there's a lack of attendance, I apologize, Trent. We probably just aren't the sexy draw, Senator Thatcher and I, so down from 1,500 to a couple hundred, maybe next time. it's a bit unfair to try to talk about this subject and other subjects in 20 minutes and then try to get you the resources that we hope that we can empower you with. So I want to make a commitment to you. If we don't get a chance to get to your question tonight, if you have other questions that pop up after you leave, or you have any other concerns, you can reach out to us at the AG's office, you can reach out to Senator Thatcher, you can reach out to Mayor Stacks, and we will engage with you to try to help empower you to better protect your families. As was mentioned, I've been serving since 2013. It's been a little while, but under those circumstances, I was appointed by Governor Herbert after some unpleasantness in the AG's office with my predecessors. It was kind of a low point at that time in the history of Utah, the Attorney General's office. And I came in at that time amidst a number of issues, 3 Supreme Court cases that were going on, and I had to immediately run for re-election. Because I was appointed, there was a special election in 2014. So a couple of months into that, my tenure, brand new as Attorney General, advisors told me that I needed to hire some DC consultants to tell me how to really be a politician. I hate politicians, by the way, just so you know. The definition of politics comes from 2 root words. Poly, which means many, ticks, which are little blood-sucking insects. And when you put those 2 together, politics. Politicians to me are the embodiment. Politics to me are selfish. Politicians are the embodiment of that selfishness. They always ask the question, what can a particular position do for me? How can this office serve my ambitions? Public servants, on the other hand, ask the opposite question, which is, how can I serve the office and the people that it represents? And you have great public servants. I mentioned some of them. Your mayor, your city council members, your police chief, and certainly Director Leanne. So these consultants came and said, tell me what your 4 most important issues are. And in no particular order, I responded back, the opioid epidemic, because it's ravaging our nation, taking far too many lives. Human trafficking, because I don't think people realize that there are 50+ million modern-day slaves around the world, and many of them are right here in our own backyard. Third, mental and behavioral health issues. I can't believe that suicide is the #1 cause of death for our young people, more than the next 3 causes of death combined. And much of that education came because of Senator Thatcher. And I've got to say, it's almost unfair. I should have been introducing Senator Thatcher. There is no person in our state who's done more to advance awareness and resources to families and persons struggling with MDD, persons struggling with suicide ideation, and Senator Daniel Thatcher. And so, just one more time, if you could, join me in giving him a huge round of applause. He really trying to preach how important this was to so many people, and they just weren't listening. I think they just weren't ready. But something that he said resonated with me, and so I told the consultants, we're going to do something about this. I don't know why it is that our children are dying in such great numbers, like our veterans and other populations highly vulnerable to suicide, but we're going to do something about it. And they said, okay, what's your 4th thing? And I said, well, Utah is known as the fraud capital, not just of the United States, but of like the world, or the galaxy. Like even Klingons from far off know about all the fraud, Ponzi scams, and schemes. And my background in law, I did a lot of those types of cases, and I said, I want to do something about that. So they said, well, wait, let us go poll these, focus group, we'll come back and tell you which are your best ones and how you should message these. So they came back after a few weeks and said, well, here's our results. If you want to become the Attorney General and win your election in 2014, go with the white-collar stuff. Protecting senior citizens, that's noble, it's great. You've got a lot of experience in that. And I said, great, all right. This is how you should message it. And they said, well, what about the other 3? And they said, get rid of all 3 of those. There's no way you're going to win because you sound like the 4th horseman of the apocalypse. Death by overdose. Death by suicide. Human trafficking? What is that anyway? Modern-day slavery? It's horrible. Nobody wants to talk about that. Everybody in the focus group, half of them turned left in their fetal position and said, no, I don't want to hear anymore. And so I thought about it for about 5 seconds and said, well, you know what? I didn't really ever plan to have a career in politics. I don't intend to stay in politics my whole career. The governor asked me to come help turn this office around. So you know what, I've always just wanted to do things on my own terms, do what I think is right, let the chips fall where they may. So if the people of Utah don't want to re-elect me in 2014, and I'm the shortest tenured AG in the history of the state, so be it. Thanks guys, I'll write you the check, you're fired, and let them go back to Washington, D.C. Now, interestingly enough, over time, fast forward 6 or 7 years, many people, thanks to voices like Senator Thatcher and many others in Utah, we have some here that I want to acknowledge later on, who've done yeoman's work in this arena, have helped educate people, helped us eliminate shame and the stigma, helped us eliminate judgment that so often attaches to these kinds of issues, mental and behavioral health struggles. And we have to be honest with ourselves. In Utah, we're a pretty judgmental state, and there are lots of reasons. We put a lot of pressure as a culture on our young people, and there are enough pressures that they have already. And so those types of things have really helped us start to have honest conversations. Here's another thing. Senator Thatcher and I will go and partner with anybody. Democrats, Republicans, Libertarians, again, Klingons, we don't care. It doesn't matter if they will help us save children. These are not partisan issues. They're not Democrat issues or Republican issues. They are humanitarian issues. They are family issues. They're Utah issues. And I want to emphasize that. We all need to be working together on it, in part because all of us are potential victims ourselves, and all of our children and grandchildren are potential victims as well. Now, again, 15 minutes, I probably have 10 minutes left. I'm going to try to do something. I'm going to give you like a super Reader's Digest version, throw out a couple of points for resources, because I always want to empower you when you go away and have resources that you can look to, that you can follow up on. So I don't want to just read statistics. I think we all agree, that's why you're here, that it's a huge problem. It's a clear and present danger. Death by suicide, mental and emotional challenges, school shootings, opioid or other drug overdoses. So let's agree that it's a really serious issue. Let me take a second to talk about opioids. I don't know if we understand the scale of what's happening. And with COVID, although I'm very supportive of educating the population and protecting ourselves as families and communities from the COVID threat, I'm a little upset because pre-COVID, we are, or have been, and are losing Americans to death by opioids, to death by overdose, at an unprecedented rate. You know what? Any given year over the last several years, we lose more Americans to death by overdose than we do, or specifically death by opioids, than breast cancer, than traffic accidents, than murders. And I'm not saying at all that we should diminish the attention that we're focused and paying to those threats. Those are serious, and they deserve all of the attention that has been shined upon them. But opioids, gosh, more American lives in 1 year lost to overdose than all American lives during the entire Vietnam conflict, all of the years of Vietnam, just to put it again into perspective. So, if you'll agree with me that it's a huge deal, it affects everyone. It doesn't matter who you are, rich, poor, rural, urban, particularly rural. They have a particularly hard time. High school kids, huge impact and problem for us. Doesn't matter your gender identity, your religion, your background. So what can we do? I want to give you a few takeaways. One, look up Utah naloxone. Naloxone has been called the blood Lazarus drug. Naloxone is free to you if you reach out to Utah naloxone. We have helped with our Utah State Opioid Task Force, Dr. Jennifer Plum, get funding so that any of you can order a naloxone kit, have it with you in your home, in your car, so that if you encounter a young person or anyone who's OD on opioids, you can revive them long enough to have emergency services come and keep them alive. And we'd save many, many lives. What was that? Utah naloxone?
Yeah.
Utah naloxone. Sorry. Should have been. Can you hear me in the back? Is that okay? Yeah, I'll adjust. Oh, Naloxone. Naloxone. Utah naloxone. Just type that into the search. The second thing that I want in terms of a takeaway
Do you realize, let me ask it this way, how many of you are drug dealers? Raise your hand. Go ahead. Dangerous with the Attorney General up here. Oh, one guy raised his hand, he's that guy. Are you work for pharma? Was that why you pharma rep out there? You got me. But here's the sobering reality, and your mayor knows this very well, because we've partnered on this, and I want to talk about it more. Many of you, unbeknownst to you, are the biggest drug dealers in your neighborhood. Why do I say that? Now think about it for a second. You don't have to answer if you're embarrassed about it. But how many of you have perhaps in your medicine cabinet there, or somewhere in the kitchen, or anywhere, a bottle of unused drugs that's old, you used part of it, you didn't throw it out, you used some, thought maybe I'll need it later on, or you just forgot about it? How many of you are willing to admit that you might have some of those in your cabinets, in your lockers, in your kitchens? That's great. Thank you for being honest. That's more than half of you. Well, the reason I say you might be the biggest drug dealer in your neighborhood is that your kids, your grandkids, their friends, once they get hooked, or even if they're not yet, they know that. And many of them take those drugs and use them. They may be selling them, they may be using them to skittle. What is that? A party? Throw in a big bowl, all the different colored drugs that they can find from your cabinets, and they just start popping them and taking them. It's like a game of Russian roulette for young people there. Drug take back. If you do nothing else in terms of the opioid epidemic, please, it's something we all do. Go through your home and get rid of all of the old, outdated, or unneeded drugs that we have. How do you dispose of them? Please don't flush them down the toilet. That causes other issues, environmental and otherwise. But Riverton pioneered an incredible program with drug take-back that uses technology, because I'm a tech guy, that helps. If you put it into these bags, if you use the formula that they have, which is low cost, and you can do this at drugstores like Walgreens, CVS, and others that are partners with Riverton City, at no cost to you, you can take them all there, and in a very safe way, it will neutralize all of the toxic elements in drugs. And once that happens, then they can take them to the dump, they can take them and safely, in a very green, positive, friendly way, get rid of them. That's opioids, and I wish I had an hour to talk about it because we need to talk about it longer, but that's like the 2.5-minute version on opioids. Mayor, just by the way, do you have anything you want me to add about the drug take-back program? This is kind of informal and kind of interactive. Feel free, because I think it's such an incredible thing that you've done for your community.
Intermountain Rivers Hospital is a great partner too, and they have a 6 to 8 ounce solution that they are giving away.
Intermountain Riverton Hospital, a solution 6 to 8 ounces that they'll give away. Or you can bring it to the police station or city hall. Mayor, you can help us work with the DEA, work with the Trump administration to relax some of the rules that make it really hard for people to be able to turn in their drugs, or lots of too many DEA regulations. I'm all for going after drug cartels and making it easier for citizens to be proactive. That's the kind of stuff that the mayor's been doing. I applaud him for it. Human trafficking, again, 1 minute. Introduction. Fastest growing criminal enterprise globally. I mentioned 50 million, something's 80 million. It's really hard to get exact numbers because the traffickers don't respond to us. It's not like they answer our survey monkeys in terms of how many people are impacted. We just liberated a group of women with a nonprofit organization that started here in Utah, called Operation Underground Yoga, a couple of weeks ago, from Venezuelan professionals who had been abducted to the Dominican Republic and being sold for sex in Haiti. And they spent their first days of freedom in years, a couple of days ago, in Washington, D.C. You can clap for that. Myself, Senator Lee, welcome, gave them freedom in America. They have temporary visas to stay while we work things out, to reunite them with their families, protect them from some of the traffickers that have been caught and are still looking for them. That happens on the far side of the world, and people think, yeah, that's in third world countries. That doesn't happen in Utah. Well, guess what? It does. In 2014, I handled one of the largest, it may still be the largest case on record for the United States, State of Utah versus Victor Axe, West Valley City, Taylorsville, a known MS-13 shot caller, drug trafficker, and also a human trafficker, who for 15 years was abusing little boys, hundreds of them, raping them, selling them for sex, and forcing them to mule his drugs, not just in high school, but junior high school and elementary schools, all throughout Utah. He was there. The feds had arrested him 6 times, deported him. He just kept coming back. When we caught him, we asked the federal government to defer deportation so that we could prosecute him with the American criminal justice system. Unfortunately, they agreed. And this time, we promised the victims he was not going to get away, that he would never terrorize our schools and our communities again. Now, during the pendency of the trial, I think he realized that. So during the trial, he actually took his own life in jail. And I was, in some ways, relieved because I didn't know legal wrangling was going to be able to get him out in national treaties that somehow would let him go. But that happened, ladies, the reason I bring it up is because where was it happening? Right in our backyard. It happens not just for sex or sex exploitation or child pornography. It happens for labor, hard labor, life-threatening labor, organ harvesting, human organ harvesting, illegal adoption. Utah just did the largest illegal adoption case. We put away actually a public official from Arizona who was running nationwide illegal adoption and taking children from Marshallese and others to sell them in the black market adoption. All of these manifestations of human trafficking. When I came in Utah, we had an F grade, or maybe it was an F plus, by Paul Sherwood International. Because of support of Utahns like yourselves, last year we got an A grade, and we have made so many strides to help protect and liberate victims, empower survivors to get their lives back again. And I first of all want to thank you for your support, but also give you resources. That was my commitment. Here are a couple of things. If Riverton High School does not have a backyard broadcast program, they ought to. Have it checked. If they do, learn about it, support it. These are high school kids educating their peers about the dangers of human trafficking, how to recognize it, how to speak up about it, how to use their social influence around the world on social media to affect it. Number 2, look up and educate yourself, whether it's Pollard's project or Operation Underground Road. There are many sites and resources that will help you learn more about modern-day slavery. The last thing I'll mention is tomorrow, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, an incredible partner of ours, that helps us find children when they're abducted or gives us tips when children have been exploited online. There's so many who are exploited for sex. It starts online and continues online. People think that they have to be abducted and taken out of their homes, across borders. Actually, in some cases, the majority of children are trafficked or exploited or abused in their own homes, in their own bedrooms. And while they're being exploited, people are videotaping that, streaming that, to monetize them for child pornography and other horrible images. So sorry if it's getting a little dark, but that's the reality of what we deal with. Please check out the NCMEC, National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, launch tomorrow. They want you to take an online pledge as parents to be able to educate yourself better, and they have many resources. So Utah is helping them launch that. It's going to be a big deal. I challenge each and every one of you as parents and grandparents to sign the pledge and then educate yourselves. Now, getting back to the issue that Senator Thatcher introduced so well. Utah Department of Human Services Student Health and Risk Prevention, SHARP, did a survey in 2019 of students grades 6 through 12. 30% or more said that they were bullied or felt depressed. And depression is one of the great drivers to suicide ideation and death by suicide. Depression, whether it's MDD, major depressive disorder, persistent depression, other forms of depression. That is something that we need to pay attention to, it's something we need to understand better. So again, these are what grades 6 through 12 grade. 16.4% considered attempting suicide. 12.3% made a plan to attempt. So they went through the further action to draw a plan. 6.7% attempted suicide one or more times. 6.7% of our kids, 6.7% statistically of Riverton High School kids attempted suicide one or more times. 15.4% self-harmed. And for so many of them, it's the pain, the shame of being bullied, marginalized, ostracized, the things that kids will do that were cruel back in our day are even ever more cruel now. There are places that they just can't hide. I grew up in a tough neighborhood in downtown LA, but I knew that if I made it past certain streets and didn't get beat up by this gang or that gang, I could get to my house. My dad had a Winchester .30 and Beretta in his head, and he was willing to use it. I knew I was safe in my house. Your kids are not safe. Even in your own home, it's not your fault. It's just the reality of what we deal with. We're so interconnected, there's so many devices, there's so many threats out there, and that's something that we just need to understand. When they are feeling that pain or they're depressed, they cut themselves, they mutilate themselves in other ways as a way to try to dull the pain or to take away the pain, to divert the pain, or to scream out for attention. In some cases, they don't hurt themselves, they hurt others. Senator Thatcher talked about safe UT application, and he is right. We have interdicted on numerous cases that could have been a mass school shooting or explosion. And so sometimes they act out to hurt others, too often to hurt themselves. Resources, I want to get to that because I've said we're dwell on statistics. We all agree it's an issue that deserves our attention. I love this one site. It's called Healthy Children. I'm going to give it to you right now. HealthyChildren.org. You can look it up. And there's a list of 10 things parents can do to prevent suicide. I'm going to go over one or two, and then you can read the rest of the 8, and we can discuss it if you want another day, or we can invite you back, and we can have a longer chat. Number 1, don't let your teens' depression or anxiety snowball. Maybe your child's barely having a bad day, but maybe something more because Lou's been going on for a couple of weeks. Fact, 9 in 10 teens who take their own lives met criteria for a diagnosis of psychiatric or mental health condition or disorder. More than half of them with a mood disorder such as depression or anxiety. Depressed people often retreat into themselves, but secretly they're crying out to be rescued. Many times they're too embarrassed to reveal their unhappiness to others, including mom and dad. Boys in particular may try to hide their emotions in the misguided belief that displaying their feelings is a 50-foot high sign of weakness. We all understand that, right? Warrior culture, boys play sports, boys are tough, boys don't cry. Let's not wait for children or youth to come to us with their problems or concerns. Knock on the door, park yourself on the bed, and say, "You seem sad. What would you like to talk about? Maybe I can help." That's just the first point. We could talk about that for a long time. Number 2, I'll give this to you because I think it's important, and I'll let you continue your homework afterwards. Number 2, listen even when your teen is not talking. Because we're talking about Riverton High School, I want to focus on this. Not all those kids who are thinking about suicide, it's called suicide ideation, tip off their troubled state of mind, troubled behaviors and actions. Studies have found that one trait common to families affected by sons or daughters' suicide. And again, I want to emphasize this point. It doesn't mean your family is a good family, a bad family. Any family is potentially vulnerable to this. But one marker is poor communication between parents and child. However, there are usually 3 or more issues or factors going on all at once in a child's life at the time in which she's thinking about taking his or her life. These include, but are not limited to, major loss, breakup, death, divorce, peer or social pressure, substance abuse. So oftentimes, opioid addiction dovetails into depression or vice versa. Access to weapons, we can talk about that. There are a lot of weapons. I'm a big proponent of the Second Amendment. But if you got them at home, lock them up. So many lives are taken because they have access to weapons. Public humiliation, shamed by their peers, severe chronic pain, many of them just hurting physically, and it's undiagnosed. Chronic medical conditions, impulsiveness or aggressiveness, or genetics, a family history of suicide. If your instinct tells you that a teenager might be a danger to himself or herself, heed your instincts and don't allow them to be left alone. In this situation, it's better to overreact than to underreact. And again, 8 more, I think, very noteworthy recommendations to help. So that was resource number 2. Look those up. Resource number 3 is 98, the Senator Thatcher mentioned. It is not ready yet, don't call it. Ajit Pai, my friend, the chairman of the Federal Communications Commission, has designated it official. It is 911 for mental and behavioral health challenges. But we don't have the infrastructure and back-end set up in each state like we do for 911. It's going to take us a few years to do that. It's one of the reasons why I want to stay as AG here, why I've turned down offers to go back to DC, because this is the kind of stuff that Utah needs to get done here so that we can help save our children. 98 is monumental. I can't tell you what a big deal that is. It started here, it started with Senator Thatcher, started with many others who lent their voices, including John Gossett, including Toby Lee, including a number of the folks who I have here in the front row from Life's Worth Living, an incredible organization. You want to talk to family members who've lost their kids to death by suicide, you want to talk to them about resources. They're based out of Tooele, they do incredible work. And they're sitting here as a resource right in front of me. The Jason Foundation, a national organization. There's so many out there, but I would recommend them to talk. And John's right here. He has a talk show on a podcast that addresses these issues, talks about it, so we take away the stigma and the judgment. I'm going to end with this. Senator Thatcher already talked to you about the emergency numbers. So Safe UT and the Safe UT app. If I do nothing in my term as AG, accept this, I feel like I've made a difference. We've accomplished a lot because the Safe UT app, it's been evolving and growing. In 2016, it launched and it was aimed at high school children, then junior high school kids. We had K through 12. We don't go yet all the way down to kindergarten, but some of the lower grades have started to adopt it. Then higher education, and then military servicemen and women. We're focusing next on first responders, and my goal as Attorney General, working with our next governor, whoever that will be, is to make sure that every citizen in Utah, someday soon, will have access to the resources that are on the other end of that app. It's a free app. The Senator said you can download it on any platform. If you haven't downloaded it, please download it now, download it immediately after, because this is a lifeline in the hands of either a person who's experiencing that type of crisis themselves, or if they see a loved one having those types of challenges or problems, they can text in and they get immediate responses. There is help right away. It's a lifeline like no other. What's the magic? Because a lot of states have hotlines. We had those before. The Senator made references. I used to volunteer to try to help coach people who were IDing suicide. And it was a great organization, well-intentioned, but I wasn't qualified, to be honest, to do that. Law enforcement dispatchers aren't really qualified to do that. That's where so many calls go before Safe UT. Now, on the other end, we have world-class mental and behavioral health experts. Thanks to Senator Thatcher, who's calling these in the legislature. Thanks to the University of Utah and Unity Neuropsychiatric. That's the distinction and the difference. Many other states are trying to copy what we have. It's been held up by the White House and other organizations as the model nationwide. You're fortunate that we have it here, but it doesn't do you any good unless you download it and take advantage of it. Tens of thousands of children reaching out in crisis because they were going to hurt themselves, or they saw somebody that was going to hurt themselves or someone else. And the Safety app, we can't overemphasize how important that app is. I could talk about it, we do, when we do trainings, for hours and hours and hours, but I want to open up questions and answers so we can, with what time we might have left, maybe answer some pertinent questions about the Safety app or any of the resources that I referenced. So with that, Mayor, I'm going to put my mask back on and let you Senator, come on up, because you'll be able to answer some of these questions. John, if you want to jump up and join, if there's a question about, there's a parent here struggling or may have lost somebody, you feel free to stand up here and you might be able to answer some questions. Come on up. Sorry.
Yeah, let me ask you, Tyler, or Casey, is this microphone here going to be used for the audience to ask questions? Take it over there, as it's in the caption, if you'd like. We've got chairs here, don't stand up, we can pull up some of the lights.
Bring up the word.
Tyler, you've been going to that. If anybody has a question, just go ahead and raise your hand. You don't have to come walk up here. Go ahead and ask.
Thanks, I have a question over here. So if I put my kid in therapy, in the future, like if he wants to work for the CIA or something, FBI, can they go back and look at that and say that if these are risks or whatever reason not to work for those high-profile jobs?
There are legal protections, first of all, for medical records, and there are juvenile record protections. So generally speaking, the answer is no. If they ask the candidate, like some elite military units do, then the answer is yes, they will know about it, because that person will have to answer affirmatively. However, we've been working with the military, and working with a lot of members, we've been working with law enforcement and other first responder units to make sure that those types of things are not commonplace to them. That's the old culture that we understand. Now, there are certain diagnoses that make sense for the employer to know about. I don't want to spend too much time getting into the minutia of that. But generally speaking, they don't have that. And I would recommend that if you feel like your child needs therapy, you know them well, you know the rest. I would, as a parent, worry more about keeping them alive today and well and healthy than future job employment, because that's just my personal view. Thank you.
You know, you make a really good point, and that is something we can continue to work on. That's part of the discussion that we have when we talk about how to end the stigma and the judgment, because the reality is, when I lost a good friend of mine who was a police officer in West Valley City to suicide, Mike and I went to high school together. We were close, and he was the last person I would ever have suspected. And when I went and I spoke to people that he worked with and said, hey, if you show them signs that you guys know he was struggling, every single one of them said, hey, as a cop, if you're struggling, you keep your mouth shut, your head down, otherwise you'll get benched while they look for an excuse to hire you. When I went and I told their police chief, hey, you've got a problem, the perception with the officers is that they get benched and fired if they said they weren't okay. The chief said, good. Because as long as I don't know, we don't have liability. Well, we've been able to fix that in the state of Utah. That chief is no longer a police officer. What's that?
That's a little
Yeah, you gotta pull your mask up. You couldn't be there all the time.
Oh, sorry.
Production is what I'm trying to say.
Senator Thatcher, I just wanted to pass it on that, because that was the prevailing culture of law enforcement 7 years ago that I knew. A lot of it depends on the leadership. So when I took over an agency that has, for instance, investigators, agents that have to go out and track down child sex predators, and as a part of those cases, look through pornography, gigabytes of child pornography. I can't tell you how much that sears their soul and affects them. But none of them wanted to go see shrink because of the perception. So I just mandated, finally took the money, and said, we're all going to go do it. So now you have a choice. Now, in the hallways, many of them later, their wives and husbands came to me and said, thank you so much, because the boss gave them cover. And once there's cover, so principals, superintendents have a lot of power to be able to shape the culture. And then again, if it's a parent, I would use your voice to encourage them to change the culture by leading out in ways like that. Give them cover. They want it, they need it, but they also don't want discriminated against.
So any other questions right over here about mental health? What, for Spanish, what opportunities are there to be taught, or what resources are there in Spanish to be taught or mental health? What agencies?
I don't know about agencies, but Safety T works in Spanish.
I know few places where to go. If someone needs like therapy or mental health, I know NAMI and some Hispanic places. But I don't know if you guys know more places.
Sí, tenemos recursos en nuestra oficina, en inglés y en español. Y si me hablas después, yo te puedo ayudar con cualquier cosa, pero sí.
¿Cómo le puedo hablar? ¿Cómo terminar aquí?
Después, te hago, ¿ok?
Ok, muy bien.
Oh, yeah.
Safety T does it in Spanish. Safety T sí funciona en español. Y hay otros programas, por eso lo traducimos así. Pero, we do need to catch up, which is why I have appointed in my office and the AG's office, still more than I'm aware of the executive branch, an outreach coordinator for the Hispanic community, because it's such a big and growing community. So his name is Tisar Munoz. Tisar was a special advisor to the governor all the time. Tisar Munoz. And I'll put that to the call person. Anyone else?
I just wanted to personally thank you for the Safety T app. My son is a sophomore over at West Riverton High School, and this past March, I got a phone call from his principal over at Joel T. Jensen. It's actually on March 12th, the day before the whole state and the whole world came crashing down, letting me know that my son had sent out a text message to his friends that he had been cutting, and had a plan and was planning on following through with the suicide at the school. He said that if they saw an ambulance there, it was because of him. To say that was one of the most heartbreaking and one of the most devastating phone calls, and it has happened before, is an understatement. And his friends were able to get a hold of Principal Leggett over at the school, as well as contact the Safety T app. And I have that app, my husband has it, my son has it, as well as my daughter. And we had exhausted multiple resources through St. Councilors Free Church, through the school district. And we finally decided that the best scenario was for our son to seek help up at the University of Utah, the uni as they call it, neuropsychiatric youth department. He was up there for 5 days. He came home the day before the earthquake, and we woke up to the earthquake that morning, unfortunately. And he was able to use all of his resources. Because of the Safety T app, my son is alive today. And someone has reported it on that Safety T app. They survived. They caught that person, and he was able to seek the help that he needed. It is an amazing app, and I just wanted to personally thank you from my family's heart that that app works, and it was worth every single amount of money that was spent for legislation and pushing that app to go through. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for sharing your very personal story. And the Attorney General here saying he would love to be able to get money from this individual as well. Really will follow up. People might have time for another question, one more question. There is one out there.
We can't see much, but we can see flashes. It's like the interrogation lights that we have.
My question is out of that group. I've had experience years past with one of my children who had to use the mental health industry and
I'm having a really hard time hearing you.
okay, let me take
I'm
a
very
listen.
hard of hearing.
So I have a son that several years ago we had to use these same type of services. We were at uni and we needed long-term care for mental health issues. And my question to you is, with your task force and people that are working on these issues with you, are you working with local insurance companies to apply pressure so that they're willing to increase the amount of funding that is available? As a parent working through these issues for years with my child, it was a full-time job trying to manage payment. It was very difficult. And for a lot of families in Utah that don't have deep pockets, the type of long-term care that these kids need so that they can succeed is not available to them. And we dealt with that for years. And that's a real concern that I have, just in general, in terms of looking at the whole process. These apps are great. I think the short-term kind of support is great. What about the long-term care and the responsibility that our insurance companies have to support these type of treatments for our students?
So that is an excellent point. And so let me be clear. Our focus over the past 6 years has been the crisis response portion, because that was, General Reyes mentioned that we had call centers, that we had suicide hotlines. Here's the problem. We had 22 different officially sanctioned numbers throughout the state of Utah. Only one was answered 24 hours a day, 7 days a week by licensed clinical social workers. The rest either went to police dispatchers or went to voicemail in some cases. And sadly, Sean and I lost a good friend to a voicemail. She actually made the effort. She reached out. She called for help. Her call went to a voicemail, and we lost her. So we've been focused on a crisis response because it has been essentially non-existent. With 988, we are finally getting a handle on crisis response. Now, there's another portion that is needed, and that is mental health first responders. Right now, when you call, roughly a third of the calls going to 911 right now are mental or behavioral health. And we have MPOT teams, which is great. I carried that bill too. But the MPOT teams, we only have 2 for most shifts in Suffolk County. Which means when you call, if you are the worst mental health call happening right now, you might get a therapist to show up, but probably not. So we need an equivalent. We need an EMT equivalent. We need someone who can train in 3 to 6 months on how to go and stabilize a situation and transport someone to a long-term care facility or a hospital if necessary. So there's more to do. We have just appropriated funds and have started building a receiving center. A receiving center is a place that is between jail and a hospital. Because right now, the 3 options that we have for mental health, you take them to jail, you take them to the hospital, or you leave them alone. A receiving center is a place where they will be able to go and receive mental health treatment, or sometimes just a safe place to sleep for the night, where they'll have access to resources in the morning. The last thing that I want to cover, and I know this doesn't give you help immediately, and it certainly doesn't help anybody in the past, but we are working, we are trying to do better. One of the most important things we can do is to bring Utah into compliance, which no state is, let's be clear. Utah is doing better than any other state, but that's like being the tallest building in Tooele. Okay? We're doing better than anybody else, but right now no one in the nation is in compliance with a requirement federally that mental health treatment be offered on parity with physical health treatment. No one with a broken arm would ever be turned away from an emergency room, and yet that is happening in mental health circles. There was a law passed by Representative Kennedy about 7 years ago that requires that all health care providers to receive federal funds or to be able to accept Medicaid, they must treat mental health with the same level of commitment as physical health. So far, no one does it. So we have a team working on it. I'm sure the AG wants to jump in and talk about that. But believe it, it's a lot of work. It requires essentially moving mountains. But frankly, after getting 98 through it, everything seems doable.
A couple of quick things I think the mayor signaled that we've run out of time. So before I forget, just to be hyper vigilant, all of you, during COVID, we have seen such an increase in the amount of depression, the amount of suicide ideation, the amount of children being victimized by sex predators and other online predators. So just please be extra careful, talk more, communicate more with your children, know what devices they're on, limit them. You got that right as a parent. I know sometimes it's hard in the negotiation process, but there are lots of resources and apps that can help you do that. That didn't answer your question, ma'am, but I wanted to get that out. Let me just address it. The senator's right. We think that we have the best crisis response system in the United States now. That's not enough. That just keeps them alive for the time being. And the long-term warp handoff to care, therapy, treatment, and recovery is one that we're struggling with, like everyone else, but we are fighting. Insurance companies don't have a lot of inherent incentives to expand coverage, absent a lot of pressure from public officials or others. So one thing that you can do is to make sure that what you brought up with us today is brought up with your representative, your senator, your city officials. And if enough voices like that continue to raise an alarm, they can put pressure on insurance companies. And I want to give you a little example of how this works to provide maybe some a light at the end of the tunnel or some hope. On the opioid fight, it's not an exact analogy, but we initially approached pharmacies in 2014 to say, could you self-regulate? So even if there is a rogue prescriber, a physician who writes, this person needs 700 OxyContin for a wisdom tooth procedure, you as the pharmacies can say, we're not going to fill that. We're going to self-regulate. And when we first approached, they laughed us out of the room. They said, why? We don't have to. There's nothing that's going to force us to. It's just going to cost us a lot more money. It's bad for us, bad for our shareholders. Well, over time, enough people rose up and said, I'm tired of my family members and my community seeing people die of opioid overdoses. And they started to put immense pressure. More stories were written, more public officials started to say, hey, this isn't crazy like that AG and the senator were talking about back in 2014. This is a real deal. And guess what? About a year and a half ago, all of the big pharmacy companies, pharmaceutical manufacturers, the CVS's of the world, the Walgreens, they started on their own. There was no legislation mandating them. They said, this is the right thing to do. We are going to start implementing limitations. So we'll only write 3 days. So you can, or fill 3 days, you can write 1,000 scripts. We're going to limit it, and then you're going to have to go back to the physician. It's going to cut off a lot of fraud. So we're working with the insurance companies. Right now, they need a little more incentive to do the right thing. And that right thing is to cover mental health, just like the senator said, like they cover physical health. So please do know that you do have champions who are we're fighting it hard. But alone, we need the community to rise up. We need a groundswell of support. We've seen it on the human trafficking side. Utah has just really become the tip of the spear because everybody seemed to be educated about it and started to talk about it. So if we can do that also with suicide awareness, mental health awareness, behavioral health challenges, I think we can achieve it eventually, but it's not there yet.
Thank you. I want to make sure everybody has an opportunity to ask questions, and we'll ensure that they get forwarded on. I'm not sure how much longer these two gentlemen can stay here, but I want to, in previous events we've had, our vendors, we've had specialists that have been out here in the Commons area. We don't have that here this year because of COVID. But I know the city will be putting together a post and sharing many of the resources that were brought up here tonight. And I want to thank Senator Nash and also Senator Reyes for their messages tonight. I also want to thank Principal Goff Riverton High School Principal, she's been an invaluable partner in these events. And again, is Principal Goff here?
No, he's not here today.
He's not here.
I'm here.
Well, thank you. We appreciate